Hello, Out Entrepreneurs. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 14 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. Today, I am thrilled to interview the brilliant Laura Laban, a fellow trans business owner that I met through StartOut, a vibrant online community dedicated to LGBTQ entrepreneurs and our supporters. So, Laura, are you ready to inspire fellow Out bosses?
Totally ready.
So Laura is the co-founder and CEO of Flying Development Studio. After 6 years of working in the tech industry, she broke out on her own and turned her side hustle into her full-time job, developing a flight simulator software program called Infinite Flight. This program is a full-featured mobile flight simulator for aviation lovers on the go. Some fun facts about Laura: she was born and raised in France and came to the US after finishing her computer engineering degree in 2006. And last year, she came out as transgender. So, Laura, welcome to the show and to the vibrant and resilient trans and gender diverse community. I'm really, really excited to have you here today just to talk more about your business and learn a little bit about yourself. So, right now, just tell us a little bit more about what you do with your business and what makes it unique.
Well, thanks for having me first. My role has kind of changed over time because, as you said, initially I wasn't alone in the company. We were two co-founders, and I was responsible for probably half of the things. But my day-to-day tasks were basically coding all the time. I worked on the flight model, on the UI, on the networking code. And one interesting aspect of the company since day one is I think there hasn't been any line of code that's been written where my co-founder and I were in the same room. We do everything remote. We work from home. And this has been how the company's grown since then. That's sort of a unique aspect of the whole company. We hired, I think we're about 8 or 9 people now, and we're just scattered around the world. There's people in Ukraine, France, Canada, different parts of the US. And it's actually working pretty well. We have Slack that we use on a day-to-day basis to communicate. We use email and all. The only thing where we see face-to-face, we have an annual meeting that happens around a conference in San Francisco called GDC, Game Developers Conference. So that meetup is coming in a couple of weeks. So everybody's pretty excited because we had 2 new people come in last year. I would say that this is one unique aspect of the company.
Yeah, it's the future of work in some respects, right? So there's no brick and mortar, and you're really managing your staff through some online tools like Slack, which is such a great way of at least project management, right?
There's one thing that's important about that because I oftentimes hear people like in those articles on Hacker News talking about how difficult it is to work remotely. I think one important aspect of people working remotely is that in our case, we actually sampled people from our community before we hired them. So there's an intrinsic interest in the business from the get-go. They were not like shopping around for a company to join. They actually were involved in the community, and either through development or just generally playing it for the ones that were community managers now. So that actually makes a difference because if you're involved in the business before you join, it's easy to work from home because this is how you worked, quote unquote, before. So it's just a continuation and you're getting paid for your hobby, sort of.
You're really living the dream. And I mean, it's clear you're very passionate about what you do, and you've almost turned a hobby into full-time employment, and you're doing really well. So I wanted to focus in on something that I see as a trend with entrepreneurs, which is the idea of when you start your business, thinking about 2 camps, and sometimes it's a both and I'm curious which one resonates with you the most. So the first thing that I see is that for some entrepreneurs, we feel a calling to pursue a purpose-driven idea or our passions. And then this other idea is that, you know, we're working within a larger organization. There's already a company culture. And for whatever reasons, we feel like we're not fitting into that culture and we can no longer show up every day and do our best work. And so that's why we start out on our own and create our own businesses. So which one of these scenarios resonates the most with you?
I guess it would be 80% my passion is driven by my idea because this project is something that I started back in 2004 when I was in engineering school, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. And oftentimes tell people that if someone was ever to buy the business at some point, I think I would just do another flight simulator because there's nothing else that I want to do in life for work. So that was really like, it's the project of my life. So that would be the first part. But I can't, having been in a big company like NVIDIA for 6 years, it's a nice company. It has the startup feel, but it's still like there was a lot of office politics, and sometimes you have to work with a manager that's being difficult, or sometimes with a coworker. At some point, I had to work with a group of guys who were close together. They came from another company, and it was difficult for me as a young grad to come and be like, "Hey, can I code this?" Like I was second guessed all the time, and it was really difficult. And the day that I left, Facebook reminds me that I left the corporate world, a few years ago. I still have no regrets. Even if my earnings were divided by a million, I would still I'd still do what I do now because it's so much more interesting.
I love that. That is such a common theme that comes up again and again, talking to different entrepreneurs and just the freedom of pursuing your passion, a really good business idea, and just making that commitment to show up every day, trusting your vision and having faith in yourself. So I want to congratulate you on doing that. And
Thank you.
And I also enjoy those yearly reminders of like, wow, this is happening, and just keep going. So I want to shift a little bit and focus more centrally around your trans identity. You had mentioned in your bio, and as I read it, that you recently came out last year. And I know that that's also a personal journey. I imagine that that was something for you as well as many of us, thinking about being transgender and how to kind of socially transition with our family and our friends and our colleagues. So on that note, as you've gone on your own personal journey, did being trans influence your journey to become your own boss?
Like a lot of trans people, I've always felt something was off. But growing up in France, being trans was not something that I even knew was a thing. There was just like a bunch of isolated feelings and emotions that I had about not being in the right body, and just something was not right, not aligned, but I didn't know what it was. It's only when like in 2016, 15, it was starting to get a little more present in my life, to a point where it was starting to like really bug me. And I started looking online, and I watched a bunch of interview TED Talks, and the light finally turned on. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like, wait, am I transgender? Like this is what it is. And I sort of tried to like get rid of it, but soon found out that you can't do it. It doesn't work, and you're just wasting your time. So I was already in the business. I already had started the business at that time. So it wasn't really something that drove me to start it, but it's something that definitely impacted the business in a way, because as I'm sure many trans people are feeling the same thing, it's like it's hard to keep it inside. And there's a lot of things there are the clues that I let out on Instagram, sometimes on purpose, sometimes, because I use Instagram as a way to communicate to our audience. We have the official Instagram, and also have one where I don't have a crazy following, but I have a few people that follow me, and I post things that I'm working on, the testing and stuff like that. And there was a few times where I posted things that if you were looking for the clues, you would have found them.
Right.
So the business was a part of it, because it's not like I was part of a big company. You can just come out and just your close co-workers know about it. Here it was like the company had to be involved, because I'm the CEO of the company and I have a lot of followers, so that impacts the business.
Yeah. And so on that, the impact of now being out as being transgender in your business, can you think of, over the past year, a time where it was difficult to bring your authentic self to your job? This could be potentially a moment where you were challenged with showing up because you were afraid of maybe losing business, or that you felt unsafe. If you could just share this really specific moment with our audience, I think that can really help other trans folks think about their own journey, potentially coming out, especially at work, and just being aware of some of those challenges that show up.
The most significant moment for me last year was definitely the coming out. I sort of had planned that coming out a long time ago. Like for a few months before that, I actually went to the Game Developers Conference, to the LGBT panel that they had. And I was looking for somebody who had any type of experience coming out in the middle of a big community of users. And it turns out like there's nobody who could help me. They're like, you're on your own. I mean, I don't know. People usually, they were always coming back to like, oh, talk to your HR people. We don't have any HR people. Okay, so
Right.
and there's no resources for community management, right? So I sort of was on my own. So I came out to my friends and my family and all that. And at some point, I also came out to a couple of coworkers. And then I planned on coming out for a meetup that we had in September. But then, it was getting more and more difficult for me to hold it in, especially after I started the hormones. So at the end of June, I decided to just tell all my coworkers. So I spoke with them on Slack one by one, said like, hey, just some news for you. One thing that I stopped doing is warning them that I have something to tell them, because they think they might be fired. And if it's a friend, they think I have cancer. So now I don't even say, I want to talk to you. I just directly tell them what it is. And since I had told them, I realized that I was going to put the burden on them to hide my identity as well, because my company was aware of it, but the rest of the community wasn't. And sometimes there were, the people, they just go on the community forums and they say, oh, this is not working, or this is not working. Can you talk to old name? And I didn't want my coworkers to actually slip and say Laura, where, when everybody was not supposed to know it. I was like, I can't have this weight on their shoulders, so I'm just going to come out. Like, either I don't tell anybody or I tell everybody. So I decided that July 1st was going to be the day that I was going to come out. And we have, on our Facebook page, we have 200 and something thousand people that are following us. We have 20,000 users on our forum. I have thousands of followers on Instagram and Twitter. And I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, what if people just destroy me? And there's a lot of haters. If you go on any YouTube video of a trans person saying like, hey, I'm transgender, if you look, there's positive comments, but if you look at the rest, it's just depressing. A lot of uninformed people. It's very difficult. So I just decided to, one day prepare the letter that I was going to put on Facebook for my family and friends. And I was just going to change everything else. And I just didn't want to send a message to the community because it would be self-explanatory, and then we would just discuss that on the forum. This is actually what happened. I changed my Instagram, my Facebook, all that, Twitter, LinkedIn, and people started wondering. I think maybe like 2 minutes later, there was a post on the forum asking like, what happened to his, at the time, account? Was he hacked by his wife? Like, what's going on? So I didn't really post anything. I let my community people, like the community managers and the forum administrators and moderators, actually help me and shielded me from all the potential negative comments. So the feedback was generally very positive, and there were some people that were confused. There were some that I didn't try to convince anybody. I guess I tried for some people, some that were sort of interested in what was happening. And it was interesting to see the dissonance that I created in some people, because we have people of all backgrounds who play the app. We have pianists from Ukraine, we have fishermen in the Bahamas, we have airline pilots, kids, anybody can be in that community. What was interesting is to see how some people who are more conservative, who had never thought about trans issues, other than the fact that they watch it on Moripovich or any type of shows where it's just like for show, and they actually take the most extravagant trans person that makes the biggest audience. They were like, wait, so how does this person who is CEO of this company working on this flight sim that I like, how is it that he or she, like, what is it? Is she transgender? I thought they were crazy. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to see the shift in some people. And we had some good discussion. I had discussions with a religious person who was kind of like, you could see the struggle in him, being like, I like what you do, but I'm supposed to like hate you, but I don't know how I can hate you because I like what you do. It was interesting to discuss with these people. So I guess that was the biggest struggle for me last year, just to take the plunge and say, hey, this is Laura, I'm transgender, and I'm open to any questions. I've had a ton of discussions since then. And what I'm happy about, like the positive thing that came out of this, is that a couple of months after that, I think it was for Transgender Coming Out Day, I posted a sort of a retrospective post on my Instagram saying like, hey, thanks for not throwing me in the garbage and still being here for me and accepting what I am. And there's actually a couple of people that posted comments saying, oh, when you came out, I was sort of disappointed because I don't like what you do. I mean, I don't like trans people. Well, I didn't like trans people, but then it pushed me to educate myself. And I guess I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. That was humbling.
Yeah, I mean, you speak to so many things that are what feel to be unique for trans folks, and yet they're also shared experiences amongst entrepreneurs, right? So like this idea, I mean, if you think about entrepreneurship, before you even set out, there's the fear, the unknown. We're humans. We want to have certainty in the directions that we go in. And so there's the fear of starting out on your own. And that fear is an experience that trans people have of our own realization, like you were saying, like, I don't necessarily have the words for this when you were younger, but something is not right, and this is scary because I'm supposed to be conforming to these gender norms and it doesn't feel right. There's something off. So I think that that's one thing that really can be to build a bridge for entrepreneurs that might be listening to the show who are not trans, just to kind of understand what is kind of a unique experience for those of us who are trans. And then also,
it does feel like the same, yeah.
yeah, and then also like what you were saying too is like this huge risk of, all right, I'm trans, I'm out to people that I love, I'm starting to come out to my friends. This is the risk that I'm going to take, is coming out as a business owner where I have these established relationships. You've been in business for around 7 years. You came out last year. Now this is going to be a big shift for some of the people that you work with and some of the people that are supporting your business. And at the same time, there were some people that didn't quite understand and probably said things that you were less skillful, but you held this space to be a model as a good business owner of just showing up and being authentic and saying, this is who I am, this is my life, and being a model for trans folks of all ages, just seeing a successful business owner showing up authentically and being fully themselves. Just by doing that, like what you said, for the positives of this is that you help shift and change some people's minds, which is also like a trait of being an entrepreneur, of like, you have this great idea and for whatever reasons, you have to course correct and change your idea on how to deliver it to the people that you're serving. So a lot of really good stuff that you shared. If you could hone in on thinking about some of the negatives of being out in your business and weighing that with the positives, what's one piece of advice from these experiences that you could share with other trans entrepreneurs that could help them?
It depends on your situation, of course. If you're coming out in an area that's very difficult, I think most people by default are okay with trans people. They just don't know any. And when I was coming out, and I guess it would be the same, like it would be my advice, when you're coming out, think about your responsibility as a trans person, your impact. Because just an example, a couple of days ago, I had a discussion on Instagram with a guy that had our current president as his avatar on his page. And I was like, okay, so he was kind of opposed to what I was doing. And I figured, like, I'm going to make this a challenge and direct message this person or ask him to direct message me. And I'm going to try to make him understand what I'm going through and see if I can convince him to come on our side of the, oh, I understand it. And it took me about half an hour to just go over the things and telling him, like, hey, ask me any questions. You know, there might be things that you don't know about. I'm here for you. I'm here to answer your questions. And spend half an hour on my phone with him. And at the end, he was like, you know what? I get where you're coming from. And I will try to convince my most conservative friends that trans people are not evil. And I was like, all right, if you need help, just let me know. And so, especially today, maybe not later. I think this is a temporary thing where we have to come out so late in our life because it wasn't okay before. I think it will not happen in the future, or way less. But I think today when we're coming out, we have this responsibility of being kind of like the poster person for the group we're interacting with, because most often we're going to be the first person that some people are going to interact with. And that was the case in France when I went to France for this holiday season. I felt like I was pioneering every relationship with people. You know, they're like, oh, are you kids? Like, yeah, but I'm a transgender person, so technically the father. And they're like, oh, I felt like the realization, like I was the first out trans person they were talking to. But most of the time people are okay with it. And if they're not okay with it, I guess don't dismiss them. Tell them, like, do you have any questions? Like, what do you want to ask me? Because obviously I'm not crazy, especially if they know you. So I'm open to any questions. And there was this study that says that a 20-minute conversation with the most opposed person is enough to convince them. And it kind of proved right with the guy with the conservative background, because at the end he was like, oh yeah, I get it.
I mean, that's huge what you're talking about in terms of being open to having the tough conversations and kind of knowing what you're getting into when people are really on the surface saying things that can be really offensive, and holding that space, and especially with people that you already have relationships with, and being willing to raise awareness around your experiences. And like you said, being a successful person and just being a good human being, and they know at your core who you are. You know, you can really take people along and get them to a place of greater awareness and compassion. And by doing that, you're also being a possibility model for other younger trans people, or I guess trans people early on in their journeys of self-discovery, which I think you can hold age constant. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a very short sponsorship break, but please do not go anywhere, because when we return, we're going to jump into our bonus round.
HR and diversity professionals, are you struggling with engaging LGBTQ talent? Do you stay awake at night worrying about limiting litigation risks? Have you considered seeking support around these concerns, but just aren't sure where to turn? Look no further. Rhodes Perry Consulting offers you solutions with the Engaging LGBTQ Talent A to Z certification. This proven 4-week mentorship program delivers skills, offers support, and connects you with other professionals committed to transforming themselves and their workplaces. Learn more about this cutting-edge program by visiting rhodesperry.com and use the promo code RPC for a 10% discount. Take action and visit rhodesperry.com.
Welcome back, Outbosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Laura just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn how to stay in touch with Laura after today's conversation. So Laura, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I am.
All right, so the first one, did your trans identity hold you back from taking the entrepreneurial leap, or did it speed up the process?
It's sped it up because, as we discussed before, it kind of is the same thing. Starting your business feels like the same thing as taking, the jump, the leap to come out. So probably helped in a way.
Yeah, you've been through that experience before of kind of the fear and the risk of starting your own business. So you had those skills already. So next question. So in one sentence, what does it mean for you to bring your whole self to work?
To me, it means being free to be who I am and not being afraid to be who I am, and also having to deal with the potential loss of the privileges that I used to have and being sort of okay with it or trying to fight them.
That's great. What's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
My habit is implicit. It's because I love what I do. But I would say as a developer, I always have my development environment open. I don't remember in the past 10 years where I didn't have Visual Studio open. It's just basically the only thing I do, except, hanging out with my wife and my kids. Yeah, I guess it would be just consistent. And I think one thing as well would be to never disregard the few minutes that you have to work, because it's oftentimes easy to just say, oh, I don't have time to work on this. I need 4 hours. Well, then guess what? You have 20 minutes. What can you do in 20 minutes? Because if you do something in 20 minutes and you learn to context switch, because you have to do grocery shopping or give the kids a bath or anything, if you learn to do that, then that's the best key to do. Learn to context switch and always remember what you did before.
That is great advice, especially for very, very busy bosses. So thank you. Name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
It would be technical support, because that is difficult with an app, because I have high expectations of the little price that they pay. And sometimes I have a feeling that now that I don't do support now as Laura, but seeing how our support guy is being sometimes targeted on his personal level, I would assume that, well, it happens already. Like I had a couple calls to do and I was targeted on my trans identity when I was not agreeing with what they were doing. They were trying to pirate the app and I caught them. So I guess this is a good thing that I keep this out of my site so I don't see all the insults and the things that might be negative.
Yeah. Please share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take the entrepreneurial leap.
To me, if I had to do it again, one thing that would convince me to do it would be that you have the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. And the most important thing is when it fails, you're going to get hit because it's your responsibility. But when it works and you win, it's your responsibility. You made this and you don't have somebody else who can take the credit for it. To me, that's the most important thing, to know that there's not going to be a boss that's going to push all the troubles on me when it doesn't work and get all the credits when it worked.
Yeah, personal responsibility and just staying committed to what you set out to do. So Laura, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before we go, can you please share one way we can stay in touch with you?
You can add me on LinkedIn, Laura Laban. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Laura Beatrix. But if you just search for my name, you can find them on Google. Or you can also email me at laura@infinite-flight.com.
Excellent. So we will include that in the show notes along with this really amazing flight simulator video that is so cool. So Laura,
and it's just, that video is just what you're going to see like coming soon is much better. If you go on our community site and you look at what we're working on, the video looks really dated.
Oh yeah. For someone who doesn't understand that world, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. So outbosses, thank you for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my pleasure to connect you with so many inspiring outbosses like Laura. As a next step, check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation and consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. For now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.